Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm kind of doing a back and forth through history of some of the firearms and guns that were used, from Operation Desert Storm, kind of all the way up until like right at the global war, what we would consider the global war on terror, like after 9/11. And uh, nothing that I'm going to show you was really officially still used after 1998, but still would have been in armories, and technically there are pictures of troops using them past 1998. But for example, I went over the XM4 type guns, the 727s, the 723s. There was really no 110% configuration. We consider a 723 an M4 profile barrel, 14.5 inch with a A1 style upper. But according to Colt's catalogs and Larry Vickers and his books, the 723 and 727s really, it just depended on what rolled out on the assembly line that day. Because in 1994 we have the official adoption of the M4 rifle. So the 727s, this is a pencil profile barrel and A2 adjustable, what we consider an A2 upper, aim point 3000. This would have been something that would have been seen during Operation, maybe not necessarily Operation Desert Storm, but thereafter Operation Gothic Serpent. And Delta had been using similar rifles to this, especially the 723s and 653s, in the 80s. And like even earlier than that, we kind of consider them, somewhat new and 93 in Mogadishu and stuff. But the 733, carbines, the XM177s, E2s, E1s, were employed like during Vietnam. We had issues with the moderators on them and the barrel lengths, and finally deciding on the 11.5 inch barrels and with the moderator attached for the XM177, like the E2s and shit, because of carbon buildup and some malfunctions that would occur due to too much carbon. But so we look at this and it's kind of like an earlier version of a 723 or a 653, because we don't have a shell deflector, but we have a forward assist. Now, this is a complete Colt upper on a PWA, and it's really cool history behind how I came in possession of this. It's a police trade-in. The aluminum stock on it is one of the originals. It's not a reproduction, but it's just kind of a really cool firearm, and kind of demonstrating the crossovers and the transition between technology and what we did to upgrade arsenals over time. And then we look at things like this is a commando style 10.5-inch CQB, early CQBR type platform. And I've got a Surefire handguard on it. This actually came as a police trade-in. And I had to jump through some hoops and wait a little while to get this gun, because it was separated. The owner had bought a lot, a lot, like literally bid, and won different military and police trade-ins, and separated the uppers from the lowers to sell them. But then I contacted him, asked him what happened to the lowers, and he was like, I'm waiting to pull them off the registry, and then I'm going to sell them as just, complete lowers. So then I SBR'd it and just, made it back a complete rifle. Excuse me. So the guy was really cool to work with me on that. But, this would have been employed by multiple different agencies, and it would not have been unlikely to see this style of firearm being used in operations well before our time in Afghanistan, Iraq. But also it would not have been uncommon to be to see them during that time period, by special operation forces, at least. Maybe not just grunts, I'm going to use quote unquote grunts or troops on the ground, but special operations, SOCOM, all of that. Delta would have had access to firearms in different length configurations. Now, like a gun that's pretty well overlooked due to really not widespread adoption, 1980s, we developed our own SMG here. And, we had some other ones, prior to this, but, like a modernized M16 A2 carbine was the Colt 635. And this is an original Colt 635 parts kit. It is on an unbranded AR lower. But in consideration to the other technology at the time, this was very clunky, especially when in fully automatic fire. So, comparison of technology and the overlap in the years, you have the 635. Then in 1966, H&K had developed the MP5, and the MP5, the roller delay system in it, made for the roller delay blowback system and all that, made for a much smoother, much more easier to maintain on fully automatic fire and burst fire. So we also we did adopt, and more widespread for special forces, the MP5 and the MP5 SD. But the 635 wasn't a very long-lived piece of technology in military history in terms of some of the other firearms here on the table. Just a weird random fact here. Ruger P95 DC, 2005, we were having trouble supplying troops with the M9. So the Department of Defense, the U.S. government, reached out, asked Ruger if they could supply 5,000 units of the Ruger P95 DC to troops, especially, well, not troops in particular, but specifically tanker crews, to be able to provide them with sidearms. So this is a overlooked gun. They're everywhere. I mean, pawn shops, police trade-ins, pretty much anything you can think of. But you have some like glass-filled type nylon lower. These things are built like tanks. And for the time, they had a lot of features on them. You have ambidextrous controls on the slide. You have ambidextrous controls on the lower for the magazine release, and just a really functional firearm. And these things are extraordinarily affordable when you can find them. This version, or this particular example, I can't remember which area, which department it came out of, but these were police trade-ins. And then the P85 was actually submitted for the XM9 military trials, and those things are also built like tanks. They're one of the best budget firearms you can get that's just never going to really probably need any maintenance whatsoever. And then just kind of trying to think of where I wanted to go next in terms of firearms here, but we'll take a look at the M14. The M1A or the M14, we're talking about 1950s technology, 1960s technology. Not a lot of action in Vietnam, but the EBR versions and the EBR CQB versions were, employed up until the mid 2000s. Kind of wild to think. Now, this is the SOCOM CQB variant that has a proprietary muzzle device on it. And out of the M1As that I've owned, this thing has the, for the shorter versions, especially like the Scout version or whatnot, the proprietary muzzle device on this, it does work. I mean, it just does what it is meant to do. And when I'm talking about felt recoil, percussion, the sound, everything, the flash, this is more enjoyable to shoot than even the extended versions that I've owned. And it could be because there was some time in between shooting the the 20-inch rifle versions versus the Scout and then this. But when I picked this up, I was very surprised at how well it worked opposed to my Scout, because one of the things with the Scout, shooting that in any type of close quarters, unless you had some really hella good ear pro, was just not going to happen. The flash, the sound, everything in between just was not enjoyable to shoot at all. But the SOCOM version here just works. And we're talking about almost an antiquated piece of technology that was then developed into like an EBR chassis that was used into the mid 2000s. So we have crossover like with multiple decades of firearms and different soldiers, using that platform. Same thing with the 1911. I didn't bring a 1911 down here, but we're, World War I, World War II, and then multiple conflicts during, we have the MEU SOC versions. The best version right now I can think for the money is the SDS import to the Military Armament Corps JSOC. That thing is almost a one-for-one copy of the MEU SOC guns, and it is built so damn good for a production level gun. I'm talking, it is, I don't think you're going to find a better one for the money without getting into like the thousands, like $1,500 to $2,000 range. But for the $800, $650 to $800 range, if you check Battlehawk Armory occasionally, you're not going to get a better MEU SOC version. And I mean, it is labeled the JSOC, and that gun is legit. But we're talking about the 1911 is still technically in use by certain military groups and special forces. So that is it for this video. I'm going to do another crossover video of just some of the weirdest police trade-ins I got and kind of go over more the Bushmaster here, the Colt, and then just some of the odder police trade-ins that I've ever picked up. Like this is another gun I look at and I think of new technology. But these were actually featured in the 2003 Resident Evil movie Apocalypse. And production of that would have started well before. So the Tavor SAR is not a new gun by any means. But to me, when I look at it, and it is a police trade-in, but when I look at it, it's an agency trade-in, not necessarily police, but it came from somewhere sandy. When I look at it, I think it's new technology, very similar to some of the guns I'm going to go over in the next video. But yeah, it's just weird to think of the overlap in the technology and how far we've came, but basically a lot of the technology has stayed the same. So thank you for watching. We are kind of moving into an era, though, by the way, as I end that, with like a renaissance, a revitalization of the bufferless style systems. Like the AR-180 was, a thing. The Daewoo's, there was all kinds of rifles back during the Cold War that didn't really get to see a lot of military adoption or usage, but the technology may not have been there to make them 110% reliable. But the BRN 180s are now out there, the 416D clones. The 416D has been being used since 2001. So we're seeing a lot. And then the Spear MCX, we're seeing a lot of these firearms come out now. The Makasi is the number one I want to get my hands on. But anyway, we're seeing a lot of these firearms now that are going back to a bufferless system for, foldability and, things of that nature. And maybe it was price points back then. I don't really know. A lot of it I do think has to do with the technology and making them reliable. But again, that's just conjecture. Anyway, thank you for watching. Let me know what you want to see next. Questions, comments, burning desires. And I'm going to hit the next video with the oddest police trade-ins that I've picked up and why I bought them. And again, yeah, thanks for watching.